Sonam. I'll be moderating the audience question and answers. So I'll start off with our first one. Hello, panelists. I would like to ask how the Columbus community's business sectors contribute to social movements like BLM. What do you believe is Columbus corporate sector's social responsibility to support all of our community members? Thank you very much.
I'm looking at you, Kyle, to kick it off.
Happy to kick that off. So that's a tough one. Look, so again, as I mentioned, everybody has a role to play, right? You've got to make sure that diversity and inclusion is not a thing on the side, right? That's first and foremost. You have to make sure that you are actually actively uplifting values of equity and inclusion in your organization, and that you're actively anti-racist. And so some people think, well, here's our corporate responsibility thing that we're gonna do is we'll donate a little bit towards this. We'll say Black Lives Matter, which again, I mean, I will say even some corporations saying Black Lives Matter, I think does matter. It doesn't absolve you of everything, but it does matter in some cases. But the other question you have to ask yourself is, what am I doing that is actually actively undoing all the good that I'm trying to do here, right? So one, what does your board look like? A lot of these boards are pretty much all white. A lot of these boards of these corporations are pretty much all white. And so you ask yourself, well, okay, no wonder you don't have any sort of strategy or policy around racial inequity and diversity and inclusion. And then if you do have a few people of color on your board, the notion that they're going to be able to solve every problem as it relates to diversity and equity is just not the case. So you have to be actively anti-racist. You have to also evaluate your practices as a corporation, right? And we know, for example, how much are you paying your employees, right? And especially if you're a corporation in a place that's not paying people a living wage, we know that disproportionately affects and impacts Black and brown communities, then you have to have a question about, what am I doing that is actually actively extracting from communities and exploiting communities rather than investing in communities? And ultimately, all this is rooted in the idea that this isn't just charity. And as Kevin mentioned before about sympathy, right? We're talking about solidarity. This has to be active in your practices and in your mission. And if you're a corporation right now and you haven't talked about these issues and reevaluating the things that you're doing as an organization, you need to do that right now. And you need to do it for more than a month or more than 2 months. You need to actively ensure that this is a part of your organization's vision and mission and values. And you can transform the sector that way. I know you can start to do that, but ultimately the private sector, of course, is going to have a role to play, but I encourage people to invest in the public sector and really making sure that we're lifting up people power and the power of the public, because we have too many people who are struggling and suffering because we've left the market as the solution to all of our problems, rather than investing in government, investing in people and health and human services, all those things. So I think it's important for companies and boards to speak up and to have a zero tolerance policy for any sort of behavior that isn't or that is problematic towards this mission of being actively anti-racist.
I'll add on to that too. I like what you said, like, what are you actively doing that's like countering the good work that is a part of your social responsibility? I think it's really important for people to be critical of what a lot of companies and corporations are investing in as well. So it's not just like, okay, internally, what does this company look like, but how is this company actively contributing to harm, not just in the communities that it's based in, but across the world? Is this company investing into a corporation or an entity that is committing human rights violations? Is this corporation a part of the fast fashion industry? Is it stripping people of livable wages? Like things like that like we might not think of in the context of Columbus, but at the end of the day, all of this oppression is interconnected, and if it's affecting Black folks halfway across the world, it's still going to affect the Black folks right in your city. So I think it's really important to be critical of that, because I think in the past few weeks, we've seen a lot of companies and corporations step up because people have been calling them out. So they'll give this beautiful donation of $500,000 to Black Lives Matter in DC. And we're like, okay, that's beautiful. That's great. They're down for the movement. But why are you making this donation, but for the past 10 years, your company has been investing in the Minneapolis Police Department? And that's just an example I'm giving because people are always wondering, why are Minneapolis protesters targeting Target? Because Target was complicit in the Minneapolis Police Department in their actions of further criminalizing that city and its community. So all of these things are interconnected, and I think that's why we do need more folks with the right politics, with the right values and morals in these spaces of budgeting and kind of like the financial records of these corporations, because where you invest is really important, and investments are long-term, donations are short-term. So I think it's really important to be critical of that, and that's a really big role that the corporate world in Columbus and just across the nation plays in.
And if I could just add to Roya's point, we are going to have to own some of this as well. We decide who we spend our dollar with, right? And after we learn or take the time to educate ourselves on the practices, the investments, the beliefs of said companies that are not supporting the work of efforts like BLM or acknowledging the work that needs to be done in the advancement of Black and Brown people, stop spending your dollar with them. I mean, at the end of the day, companies don't have consciousness. They run off of money, right? It's all about the dollar. And the Black dollar, I can't speak specifically to the brown dollar, but the Black dollar, more goes out. I can't think of the percentage off the top of my head. I'm sure Kyle could say it, rattle it off for me. But I would imagine 75 to 80% of it is going out the door. And it's not being reinvested back in businesses and corporations that truly support efforts around Black and Brown communities. So we have to own our own complicity, as Austin reminded us, and these companies continuing not to support our efforts.
Yeah, and speaking to investment, if corporations really want to help, how about some reparations? Some reparations.
You're going to have to talk to your boy Trump about that. I need to stop. I need to get off of this call, first of all.
Nah, but the Japanese got reparations after their internment in World War II. The Jews got reparations after the Holocaust. The Chinese after the Opium Wars. The Native Americans even after, the United States took their land. But Black people for slavery, no reparations. And there are countless organizations that benefited off of the slave trade and profited off of it, even if they were only to reinvest or give in reparations the amount of money that they made off of the slave trade, that would still do a lot. So, I mean, just as you said, with that investment, donations only go so far. If they really want to change something, reparations. And I'm not saying it's not reasonable. It's definitely reasonable, but it's not probably plausible. Like, I can't see these organizations just giving out money, but I mean, yeah, if they really want to do something, there you go.
Yeah, I think I'll just say real quickly, I think another thing, like tying together what everyone has so eloquently said, is watching out for performativity. I think especially when you have all these protests, you get all these companies who are like, we stand with you, we see you, we hear you, but really, what are you doing behind your closed boardroom doors? Is your only Black officer your chief diversity and inclusion officer? I don't think that counts as having representation. I think especially if you look at companies like in the tech sector, it's notoriously bad for like Black representation, and yet that is the place that is currently booming. That is the place that you see people becoming like millionaires and billionaires overnight. And not to say that money is everything, but that economic investment is very important and is necessary to the improvement of the Black community. And yet these companies will put out their reports year after year saying, okay, we have 1% of our company comprised of Black employees. We need to do better. You've been saying you need to do better for 10 years now. What are you doing? What steps are you actually taking? So I think that investment is important. Your actions are important. And I think really evaluating the dissonance between what you're saying and what you're actually doing is important.
Thank you so much for your thorough responses to the questions. And